and it didn't work. All right, we're still experiencing this problem. This is not fun. Let's see if I can get it to work. It worked. Hold on. Oh, now let's, if only StreamYard has the ability to recognize this, and it doesn't. I don't understand why it can't see this. Okay, I'm just trying to think how to do it now. Yeah, I'm not one of those guys that thinks the devil's at work running the show here, but I mean, when we talk about something as important as abuse, and then all of a sudden can't even get you can't even get it to pop up on the screen. So we may just be a new ground. It's not letting me my software is not letting me share my computer screen at all. And I need to be able to share a screen if you're going to see the text. If not, you're just going to have to for some reason bring your own Bible out so you can see it, because it's not letting me do it here. Video file. Nope, that's not going to work. Share screen. You know what? Let's see what happens if I share my whole screen. It always tells you not to do this because, some malevolent person can take over my computer. So that's why they tell you not to do it. All right. Let me try that again. I'm going to try one more thing, and then if not, I'm just going to move on despite the technical glitch. Hold on, what is that? StreamYard. Nope, that's not going to work. That's unfortunate. All right, well, what I wanted to show you, and the people in the room are going to be able to see this. I don't think those of you at home are going to be able to see it, but I'll just, you're going to have to look at my face for an hour. So in Genesis chapter 30, I just wanted to talk about the character Dinah. Keep in mind that Leah is the first wife. And how did Jacob feel about Leah? It wasn't even. It was about equivalent as he loved Rachel and despised Leah. Okay. Also, Jacob's behavior towards his first wife, who he did not deeply love, also affected his relationship with his children. And so if you remember, Leah had the first sets of sons. So you have Reuben, Levi, Simeon. Let me get this thing. So we had Leah and Jacob have Reuben, Simeon, Levi, Judah, Zebulun, Issachar, and then finally they had a daughter together. So the Bible mentions a daughter. And the people, unfortunately, I can't show you this online, but you can see here on the left, on my left, your left too. You can see Reuben, Simeon, Issachar, Zebulun, Levi, Judah, and then you see Dinah coming down there. Anybody remember anything about the names of the children? What they reflected? The naming of the children, do you remember what that reflected? Oftentimes the rivalry between the sisters. Reuben, I see a son, you don't, right? And so there were all the naming of the kids often reflected the feeling of the mother in this antagonistic struggle within the home of polygamy and whatnot. And then I just wanted to point out that the name Dinah comes from the Hebrew word din, which means judge. So in what way, whatever Mama was thinking at that time, she was thinking of perhaps judging or feeling judged in a positive. May God judge me or whatever. But that's what she named her daughter, Dina. Okay, 34. And I can put this up on the screen here, but they're not going to be able to see it at home. I think they just see my face, unfortunately. Yeah, you guys are stuck with that. So I am going there in the room. If you're in the room, you can see the text. If not, we're in Genesis 34. I invite you to follow along, please. So now Dinah, the daughter of Leah, whom she had borne to Jacob, went out to see the women of the land. Okay. This is quite uncharacteristic for a young woman. Luther says she's probably 12, to be running off and meeting the women of the land. What do you think that means? What? Yeah, the Gentiles, right? Remember, Jacob is camped out in front of Shechem, or yeah, and so she's out amongst the Gentiles. She's seems to be an adventurous woman. Okay, she's not staying in the house. You know, keep in mind she has older brothers and a father. Nobody seems to know Dina's not home. Somehow she's out there. You just need to know that. She's out there. She went out to see the women of the land. Now, at that point in time, you leave the shelter of your home and you're in a riskier situation. Not that anything bad has to happen, but I've already hinted that we're headed towards trouble. And when Shechem, the son of Hamor, the Hivite, the prince of the land, saw her, he seized her and lay with her and humiliated her. So when she was out of the protection of the home, she fell into the grasp of this Shechem, who was the son of Hamor, the Levite, the prince of the land. So I'm pretty sure Hamor is the prince and Shechem is just the son, the way that I see that. Now, the Hebrew for the word he seized her, they've got a word for seize. That's not it. The word there threw me off because the word basically means that he took her as a wife. Lakah. So he took her. This is the word everybody uses when you take a wife. But yet the translators have chosen to use the word seized because of using it in conjunction with the next word, humiliated her. Okay? So this comes from a word just to be humbled. Okay? Ana. So this is a word when people do things to you to shame you or put you low or to condescend against you in an abusive and oppressive fashion. That's when this word gets used. So often the psalmist cries out as a person who has been abused or is in a situation where they're being humbled. I'm going to show you, I took some notes and let's see if I've got that screen. Genesis 34, 2. I want to show you my personal notes here. Where are my notes? All right, here we go. So in the Brown Drivers Briggs Dictionary of the Hebrew, it says that the word humbled could refer to cohabitation. Okay, so it can refer to just sleeping with her. Okay, and that's a more gentle view. In Halut's Hebrew commentary, which they look at all the different places these words are used, it says that this word is described as raping a woman. And it appears in 2 Samuel 13, chapter 14, verse 22, the book of Judges, chapter 19, the book of Judges, chapter 20, Lamentation, chapter 5, and also as a word for abuse in Ezekiel 22. Okay, so my point being then that we're likely dealing, the text is not typical for a marriage. So whatever's happening, we don't have a description that Dina resisted. We're not given those kind of details as to what happened. But watch the reaction in the chapter, and this is likely, unfortunately, a rape. Okay, this is a Canaanite man, this young Shechem, and he's just taken a 12-year-old who just wandered out of the house. He didn't talk to the family. He didn't offer gifts. He didn't have any conversations. He just took her. All right, Klaus, you had a question there? Yes. Right, and this is going to happen in David's family with David's daughter too. So this repeats in the family history generations later, where there's another rape that occurs, and David doesn't do anything about it, and so David's sons do, and it wreaks all kinds of havoc. You know, the king has the ability to pronounce judgment. So we're going to see how they react here. So I'm going to side with the commentators who say that this was a shaming sexual abuse event of some sort, of which Dina is a victim and not a willing participant, and not to be blamed. Though the text does say that she has wandered out of the protection of her family, but maybe she didn't feel safe at home anyway, right? Sometimes when the home environment's not good, people go out looking for things. And boy, when you're out looking for something that you don't have at home, especially amongst young women, you can get taken advantage of. They're still victims. Yeah, was it even interesting? You know, just curiosity. Who knows? I don't know. We're not told anything. Unfortunately, we're just not told her side of the story. And his soul was drawn to Dinah, the daughter of Jacob, and he loved the young woman and spoke tenderly to her. It doesn't seem like, this is like a lot of things in the world. Can a husband rape a wife? Can a boyfriend rape a girlfriend? Right? Can affections be there and still abuse is present? Absolutely. So here we have the Bible has one of these complex events. It's nice to keep all things simple when you can, but when it's complex, by all means, you must leave it complex. And this is complex. So it's a rapist who then has affection towards the girl and tenderly talks to her. I wonder what he's tenderly saying. Hey, don't tell your dad. Don't tell your family. I love you, right? It's like the husband that smacks his wife around and then buys her gifts. I don't know what's going on here. And by the way, there are a lot of abusive relationships that also contain surprisingly deep love for each other. And it may not always make sense to us, the emotional connections that people have in those situations. Yeah. Are you talking about in Cleveland? Yeah. Those girls that were taken and put into the home, and yeah, that's definitely different than this that is much more awful. But I mean, you can't, how do you measure awful? It's awful. And Dina now is a victim of some sort of sexual abuse. And so here's what happens. So Shechem spoke to his father Hamor, saying, "Get me this girl for my wife." Right? So it sounds like Hamor has somewhat of a spoiled little brat, and we don't know what he knows about the situation, right? But he's now Shechem wants to do the right thing by having his dad make arrangements for her to be wife. But the thing is, he's already done it. That's the whole idea of the humility. He took her as wife, but he didn't follow the procedures of the family, the culture, or the respect for the woman that he wanted to marry. All right, so now we get another word. So now Jacob heard that he had defiled his daughter Dinah. Okay, so we get the word here, tame, which just means made unclean. So that's a more of a ceremonial word here. So he uncleaned my daughter. So here we get the idea that whatever Dinah was, she was a virgin girl. She is no longer a virgin girl. Okay, so that doesn't necessarily mean violence here, but it does mean that sexual intercourse has occurred. And so she is no longer a virgin daughter that Jacob can offer in that cultural exchange of marriage that takes place. But his sons were with his livestock in the field, so Jacob held his peace until they came. So Jacob remains a little calm here. I don't know whether that's a good thing or not, but he doesn't immediately tell her brothers what happened. And so right now, that was great storytelling. So in this story, we zoom out to this other group of individuals who are going to be concerned about this abuse and this violation, and then we shift back to Jacob. But let's see how Jacob responds. This is his daughter. He seems to be concerned about her brother's feelings. He doesn't seem to be talking about his own feelings of offense. And this goes to show that despite the fact that Jacob has wrestled with God and has a new name, that he is still a sinner. Okay, so let's see what happens. And Hamor, the father of Shechem, went out to Jacob to speak with him. And the sons of Jacob had come in from the field as soon as they had heard of it. So word gets out. And the men were indignant and very angry because Shechem had done an outrageous thing in Israel by lying with Jacob's daughter, for such a thing must not be done. Okay. So and it well the yeah, Jacob doesn't say this. It seems like this is more the sentiment like, hey, you laid with Jacob's daughter, right? So they're indignant more than Jacob has expressed any indignancy towards this. And then you can imagine dad of the rapist, right? Right? People of power get away with this kind of stuff, don't they? Right? You're more likely to get away with it if you're a person of power than you are an average person. But Hamor spoke with them, saying, "The soul of my son Shechem longs for your daughter." Right? Hey, it started off as abuse, but it's turned into love. So let's just forget the offense. Give her to me, give her to him to be his wife. Now, is that the right way to deal with a crime? Let's just move on. You ever done that? Or been in a situation where an offense has occurred and then the strategy is let's move on? How disrespectful that is to the person who was wounded and hurt. That actually is a shaming sort of behavior because the victim isn't getting any justice, vindication, or anything in that. You're just saying, let's move on. And you can imagine how that feels to the person who's a victim of abuse to, let's say, can they just move on from that situation? I don't think so. Yes, Klaus. Right. Well, that's the next verse here. Well, that's the next verse. But this verse before he gets to that, he's basically saying, let's move on and just get to marriage. Let's just get the two kids married. My son loves her. He's already made one flesh with her. The two have become one. The half of the reproductive system of the one has met the other. Hey, so let's get these two married. And then he goes on with this. Let's broaden this and make marriages with us. Okay, so let's continue this as a trend. Give your daughters to us and take our daughters for yourselves. So let's do some intermarrying. That may have been the culture that they lived in, that was the sort of thing you did. By the way, there were invasive forces, world empires that would do it that way. Some enemies would come in and just eliminate the people that were there or enslave the people that were there. They wouldn't intermingle. The Babylonians were that way. They didn't mingle with the people they conquered. The Assyrians were the opposite. They would immediately invade, displace people, and begin the intermarrying process, right? Just kind of mix it all together, like the kings of Europe, right? You just mix it all together, and that made it better, didn't it? So, yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I don't think we'll ever hear any English monarchies doing ancestry DNA. Or any monarchy from that point. You might discover all kinds of chromosomal weird stuff going on occasionally in those day and age amongst the wealthy. Keep in mind that the Egyptians married siblings. So that explains a lot of the people buried in pyramids. All right, you shall dwell with us, and the land shall be open to you. Dwell and trade in it and get property in it. So we're going to go from an abusive situation. We're going to make the best of it. We're going to move forward. We're just going to use this unfortunate event to kind of uh, meld our lives together. That's Hamor's version. And by the way, this would be kind of a form of syncretism, which is where the world says, hey, you're a church, you have feelings, you have opinions. Why don't you just align yourself with our political party? Okay, that's called syncretism. So, in some sense, there's a separation of those two things, but syncretism would say, what if we could just meld them together? Wouldn't that be great? And that's kind of the attitudes that we have here. Other attitudes might be that we would stay separate completely, right? So, what is the family going to do? This is an interesting invitation here. Shechem also said to her father and to her brothers, let me find favor in your eyes, and whatever you say to me, I will give. Okay, by the way, if you raped a woman in book of Leviticus, there was a fine that had to be paid, punitive. Okay. Ask for me as great a bride price and gift as you will, and I will give whatever you say to me. Only give me the young woman to be my wife. What a nice guy, right? So Shechem is trying to woo likely an irritated and angry family. So, hey, look, I understand we got off on the wrong foot. You name the price, and we're going to move on from this. Right. And then again, this is what I'm saying, that sometimes people of resources don't acknowledge the hurt they cause because they don't have to. They can bypass it, right? This kind of way. Let's just name your price to let this go and drop it. Again, This isn't a conversation about Dina at any point into what she's feeling now and how she's hurt. If anything, all of this conversation so far doesn't acknowledge her at all and the hurt that she's experiencing. Okay? Bypass, Buypass. Yeah. Right. And and by the way, there is not sin amongst the wealthy and righteousness amongst the poor. So we're not doing that any more than the things that I've talked to many of you about. One of the things, like, to muddy waters and show complexity, one of the Lutheran pastors in Ukraine talked about how awful the Ukrainian government has been to the Lutheran church. Persecution, confiscating property, making life absolutely miserable for the Lutheran church there. And keep in mind, Ukraine was one of the most corrupt governments on planet Earth, in the top 10. And then the pastor goes on to say, but we are on the side of the Ukrainian people. And so we stand with the Ukrainian people and with the Christians in Russia who are sound mind, who are rooting for the kingdom of God that lasts forever. But I found it interesting that he talks in there and he says, "Look, I'm not gonna tell you the Ukrainian government is heroic." And this is a Ukraine man from Ukraine. He's saying, that's not been my experience with my government, but I do root for the Ukrainian people in this time. And then he looks forward in the art. Did you read it, Klaus? I sent it to you. Anybody that wants it, I can send it. He does look forward to, maybe in the end, if there is a Ukraine, that it would become almost what you and I are told it already is, right? In the way that the media portrays heroes and villains. We always draw the line, right? Batman and the Joker. It's never that complex, or it's never that easy. It's always much more complex. Yeah. Right. Yeah. Yeah. Right. And my only point was that there's more complexity than the hero villain kind of thing that's going on there. And I find it very interesting how quickly we get on bandwagons as people. Like, we just do it. And it's kind of amazing because we have that blind justice thing going on. We have statues wearing blindfolds because we're not supposed to be people who are quick to judge, or in those situations. Now, I'm not at all defending the nonsense with Putin or anything like that. I think it's awful and whatever. But I'm just saying that you have corrupt states amongst humankind, and that includes all world governments, have some level of corruption at some point. No matter how shiny and bright the halo you stick on it, right? There are people that are victims of it and through it. And there are always things. The church should be always asking the government to rise to the standard to which God has called it, right? That's what our job is. We're to be a voice outside of government to government, saying, rise to your calling, right? That's in some ways. So this is governmental in the sense that we're dealing with a prince. This whole interaction right here is legal court. That's what this is. It's legal court. They're not even dealing with the sexual offense. Okay? It's all about bride price. It's all about this or that. The sons of Jacob answered Shechem and his father Hamor deceitfully because he had defiled their daughter, their sister Dinah. Again, we've got the word unclean. They had made that Shechem had made her unclean. That is, took her virginity away. Now, they are deceitful. Now, I find this interesting. Does that sound like a family trait? These people are really good at this. It's been going on for generations. This family is a family of tricksters. Grandmas, grandpas, aunts, uncles, mothers, all of these people. Dad was a trickster. What did Dad go down in history for? Tricking his twin brother out of his birthright and blessing, right? So it's no surprise that despite the fact that these are the sons of the despised wife, they're still not apples that have fallen far from the apple tree. They said to them, "We cannot do this thing, to give our sister to one who is uncircumcised, for that would be a disgrace to us. So we've got a problem here. You're not circumcised. So we got to get that done." Now, and Rudy Blanc pointed out that in chapter 34 of Genesis, God is never mentioned. He's never brought into any of these conversations or actions. It's not that God's absent, it's the people that are here are functioning in some ways not on that level as God as judge. They're not looking for God to vengeance his mind. They're not looking to God for vindication. They're doing their own thing apart from God. But yet they're going to use circumcision, which was a spiritual covenant between Abraham and God. And it did apply to proselytes or other people that were added to the community that were non-Jewish, who were Gentile. And so they said, "Only on this condition will we agree with you that you will become as we are, by every male among you being circumcised. Then we will give our daughters to you, and we will take your daughters to ourselves, and we will dwell with you and become one people." Right? Thinking about the dividing wall of hostility, one of the dynamics of the church, you had the Jew-Gentile thing, and trying to bring those two groups together in Christ. Pagan baggage, and then you had Jewish baggage that was often brought in that people saw a righteousness in that was equivalent to faith in Jesus. And the early church struggled. Here they're saying, just merely remove the foreskin from all of your males and we'll be one people. What? Yeah. Well, we already told in the text it's deceitful. So they're not all using circumcision as a mission. They're not at all interested in becoming one people. God's not part of this, though it's God's circumcision. Is it entirely possible that God's stuff gets used by the world to do their stuff? You bet. So you bet. But if you will not listen to us and be circumcised, then we will take our daughter and we will be gone. I have a feeling that Jacob's blessing was something you wanted to have in your neighborhood. But that's the threat. We're going to leave. Okay? Their words pleased Hamor and Hamor's son Shechem, and the young man did not delay to do the thing because he delighted in Jacob's daughter. Now he was the most honored of all of his father's house. Okay, I don't know that that means he was the best in his father's house or that he was the most revered in his father's house. Okay, the most important son of his father's house. So Hamor and his son Shechem came to the gate of their city and spoke to the men of their city. This also is courtroom. So the gates are where edicts are pronounced. It's where often commandments are given. This Sunday, watch when Jeremiah gets in trouble for preaching God's word. The first people to yell at him are the priests because he's in the temple. Then they take him out to the gates of the temple and the officials show up. And that means the politicians show up. But they take Jeremiah to the gate. And the reason why is you'll hear in there, you should be put to death. It is a verbal form in Hebrew, it's a hifil. It means that could be translated, you are worthy of capital punishment. To death row with you, Jeremiah, for saying these things. And then Jeremiah turns around, you going to put God on death row? Because I only said what God said. So whatever you do to me, so be it. Right? So I find that interesting. So we're at the gates here again of the city. So this is political. All of these things are is binding, legally binding activities that these people groups are interacting with. There's covenants being written. Yes. Right. 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 And keep in mind that this is a moment of possible military interaction between these two groups. Right. So Jacob could say, look, I don't care what you pay. You're the ones that are going to pay a price for hurting my child. Right. I don't hear this angry activity from Jacob at all about his daughter. It kind of breaks your heart. Jacob knows to pray. He prayed for reconciliation with his brother Esau after his tricky behavior there, but I don't see him pray in this chapter, right? And this just goes to show in the complexity of you and I are sinners and saints. Yeah. Well, and this is why in churches we always giggle a little bit. You know, the separation of church and state is quite convenient in some people's thinking. Like all of a sudden, like, well, the pastor's done his thing. Now it's church business. Now we're going to do the business. And I've always said in this church and all the churches I've served, there's no separation of the church business and the Lord's business. It's all one business, right? So the numbers are as sacred as in some ways, the other things that we do. It's all part of that. We're not separating God out from it because when you do that, you get a lot of weird things. You must serve and do your work as a Christian as before the Lord, whether your boss is a Christian or not. You see that in the New Testament where Peter writes to the church, "Hey, I know your master may not be a Christian, but nonetheless, serve your master." Yes. Well, Jacob was talking at first because Hamor interacted with him, and then the boys have taken over from them on. The boys have taken over. Yeah, and keep in mind that this family is just getting warmed up to what they'll do. They'll turn on their own. They'll put Joseph down a hole and sell him into slavery. This is the same group of people. Okay? Genesis is also showing us why, in some ways, you may not find the blessing going in birth order amongst the 12 sons either. All right. These men are at peace with us. So this is Hamor talking about the covenant. So here's the contract between Jacob's people and our people. So here are the terms. that they're asking us. And keep in mind, everybody knows that this isn't going to go well unless we come to an agreement. They say they're going to leave, but maybe Hamor thinks that it could get more sinister than that, and he would be right. Let them dwell in the land and trade in it, for behold, the land is large enough for them. Let us take their daughters as wives, and let us give them our daughters. Only on this condition will the men agree to dwell with us, to become one people, when every male among us is circumcised as they are circumcised. No mention of Dinah and Shechem's awful behavior. Find it interesting, right? Only tell them what you want them to know. All of a sudden, now everybody in this town is drug into this conflict, and they're not even told what's going on, right? And I'm going to tell you, sinful behavior has so much collateral damage. It's unimaginable. Good people get hurt and do hurtful things a lot of times because they're led astray into some of this nonsense. If everybody was, let's talk to the Most High God, the Creator God. What is it that we're to do? I mean, it could be that Shechem's not going to be the most honored in his family any longer, right? He may not have his life by the end of the day if justice were done, but it doesn't seem like they're all that interested in justice at this moment. Not for her. Will not their livestock and their property and all their beasts be ours? Keep in mind, this is Abraham Enterprises. This is a large operation, family with wealth. Let us agree with them, and they will dwell with us. All it costs us is our foreskin. Sorry to be so frank there. And all who went out of the gate of his city listened to Hamor and his son Shechem, and every male was circumcised, and all who went out of the gate of his city. So they agree to it. Okay, it's a done deal contract. It's a contract between deceptive sons of Jacob and these people. And it's a contract of foreskin. But what's sad about it to me is that's not why God gave circumcision. He marked Abraham's flesh in a promise that he would send one from Abraham's line, from his very body, who would be a blessing to all the families of the earth. Now, here, circumcision is used as a weapon. It's weaponized faith, right? And doesn't that break your heart a little bit to see it? But at the same time, I appreciate the honesty of the scriptures about how people work, right? As much as like in Sunday school, we tend to teach the Bible stories in a kind of cleaned up way. And that's appropriate when you're teaching young children. You don't tell the story of the gospel starting in Genesis 34. Let's just put it that way. But if you're ever teaching on original sin and sinning after conversion, then Jacob's a great person to say, look, even those that have a changed will and who have the working and words of God are not always faithful to it. Not in their thoughts, not in their words, and not in their deeds. On the third day, when they were sore, two of the sons of Jacob, Simeon and Levi, Dinah's brothers, took their swords and came against the city while it felt secure and killed all the males. I mean, it's absolutely an atrocity committed by Abraham's family. It's an atrocity. They killed Hamor and his son Shechem. Who should have possibly died in this whole scenario is probably Shechem. But Shechem had money and a powerful daddy. Right? His son Shechem with the sword and took Dinah out of Shechem's house and went away. This may have made things worse, is that Jacob never brought his daughter home. From the time Shechem took her, he's been the other side of the gate. The sons of Jacob came upon the slain and plundered the city because they had defiled their sister. Is that is that correct? This vigilante killings often kill the wrong person, right? This is why we have a courtroom that we don't judge people and condemn people to death based on emotion. That's why that's why everyone, including the criminal who seems like a slam dunk, should be judged via a non-emotional court and based on the evidence, right? And so here, this is vigilantism. They didn't ask God to do vengeance. They didn't ask God to vindicate them. They've taken care of it. They've done what they've made themselves divine in wrath and judgment. Yes, Klaus. Yeah. Yeah. So here we have a different word for they came to, what did they say? The sons of Jacob came upon the slain. Okay. And they plundered the city, which, yeah, it's kind of interesting. They made to them unclean. Yeah, that's interesting. That's not what I thought was going to be there. Oh, it is their sister, Achotam. So it is plural. They had made his sister unclean, and I mean, you could make a case for it. I read that correctly. I know enough to be dangerous, but they uh, they are guilty in the sense that Hamor and Shechem and they as a people didn't cry out for what's truly justice amongst these sojourners who have been defiled by the locals, right? They don't do that. And so in a sense, there is that guilt. The problem is we have the wrong judge. It wasn't the sons of Jacob that were to do the judging. That wasn't their job. And this is not a legal verdict. This is a massacre. This is you can imagine the devil grinning here. Now, Sodom and Gomorrah, the devil wasn't grinning over that. That showed that God had not forgotten his ancient animosity with Satan and against the ways of Satan and the thoughts of Satan and the works of Satan. Those were judged, but by the Lord. But when humans judge humans this kind of way, no doubt he smirks. So now they take the flocks, their herds, their donkeys, and whatever was in the city and in the field, and all their wealth, all their little ones, and their wives, all that was in the houses, and they captured and plundered. So, by the way, this other than Abraham's skirmish with the northern kings, this is one of the biggest bloody conflicts between the family of Abraham and the locals. Then Jacob said to Simeon and Levi, "You have brought trouble on me by making me stink to all the inhabitants of the land of the Canaanites and the Perizzites. Okay, so again, what is Jacob's main concern in this part? Himself. Right? This is old Jacob, old Adam stuff. My goodness. I read a quote today, and I think it might find its way into my sermon, was when you think you know the Word of God well enough that you might think, perhaps I'm done learning all there is to learn, then you need to be reminded that the devil is never done with his diabolical to-do list. And one is that he will kindle disbelief in you, and he will kindle in you thoughts that are wicked. Right? That's from Luther's Large Catechism. So you have brought trouble on me by making me stink to the inhabitants of the land, the Canaanites and the Perizzites. My numbers are few, and if they gather themselves against me and attack me, I shall be destroyed, both I and my household. Now, what does Jacob think his safety would be in? Numbers. He's worried about the numbers. That's not what people of faith are worried about, the numbers. They're not. My God is a dread warrior who defends my cause. He is a God of vengeance and vindication in his way and timing. But Jacob seems to think that he's in political trouble because he's merely outnumbered. And if these people make an alliance because of this atrocity against him, he could be in trouble. And this is the guy that just reconciled with his brother. But he doesn't seem to be able to apply what he's learned in one moment in every moment of his life. And I resemble that too. Yeah. Well, what would happen in this case? In a legal system, Shechem should have been judged harshly. He shouldn't have been able to barter and bargain to get a wife of a person he forcefully took. But neither should Simeon and Levi get a scolding. And that's all. They merely get scolded. They don't pay restitution to the wives and sons of these people that they've killed. They just take all the stuff. And so I think it's strangely alarming when the world and the people of faith start to look exactly the same. And I think we're supposed to be alarmed at that. Oh Lord, it ought not be. Jacob should not cry out about his shame and his standing in society. He should cry out for his dear daughter. Who cries out for Dinah? Right? Your own daughter, you and your wife. But they said, should he treat our sister like a prostitute? So there we go. Judge, jury, executioner. Simeon and Levi, they get it done. Would they be heroes in our society? Would we possibly put a halo on them? They did justice where no one else did. Right? I mean, you can see how it can get a little dicey in the complexity of this because a lot of people died that had done nothing wrong. Keep in mind, these were people that Abraham had gone to and fro in all of Israel and built altars and taught people about the one true God who had made promises to Abraham and that all the families of the earth would be blessed. They would have heard these stories. They might have said, He's given you the land in which you stand. It's our land. But nonetheless, Abraham never acted aggressively towards the people. And the only land he owned was a burial plot. Here, Jacob moves in, builds a house. So we have somewhat of a permanent dwelling in this area. And you know where all this has taken place? In Samaria. This is the place where Jesus meets the woman at the well. I don't want to run that story too far because it's not, Dinah and the woman at the well are not the same story, But nonetheless, I find it interesting that in the New Testament, we find another woman marginalized, pushed out by her own doing. Well, we're not told all the details, but it's kind of interesting. Same exact spot. There we go. Yes. Yeah, it is a Wild West feel, isn't it? Yeah. It's amazing to me, and I get excited like for the Christmas story. The word became flesh through this family of tricksters, right? And yet, Jesus himself turns out to be the greatest trickster of all. Just ask Satan. Ask Satan if he thought that cross up there was a win-win for him. And it turned out to be a loss-loss. But tricking Satan's another thing. That's that ancient animosity, right? Some good stuff. And here, a very simple blessing for you. God bless you that no chapter in your life be devoid of the name of God. Amen.